The old house at the end of the village was not just a structure. It was forgetfulness itself. It was a tall, hunched stone building. Its walls were entangled with ancient ivy, and its window panes were jaundiced with the grime of time. And in that house lived an elderly woman named Grandmother Elara, utterly alone in the wide world. Elara had no relative to send a letter to, no neighbor to knock on her door. The house was her final sanctuary, but also a vast cemetery of loneliness where she was trapped within four walls. As the last rays of the sun withdrew behind the mountains in the west, a cold wind would always seep into the house. This wind would whisper Elara's deepest fears, telling her that she was never truly alone, but that this lack of solitude was a terrible thing. This wind would whisper Elara's deepest fears, telling her that she was never truly alone, but that this lack of solitude was a terrible thing. That evening, the first incident pierced the silence. The heavy, walnut-carved stool in the corner of the room suddenly and slowly moved a few inches on its own, as if moving away from the stove's heat. It was as if someone had been sitting right by the stove and quickly got up, sensing Elara's gaze. Elara's cup rattled in its saucer. Her heart began to pound as if it would break her ribs. She slowly lifted her head, staring at the empty space. "Who is there?" Elara whispered, her voice so faint it sounded like a private prayer. There was no answer, only the sound of the crackling wood. Just as she was about to relax, a rapid tap, tap, tap sound struck the frosty kitchen window. Elara jumped up, brought the candlelight closer to the glass, but there was no one outside, no stone, no branch. Only the darkness and the approaching rustle of the storm. When Elara finally lay in her bed that night, she felt the cold wind coming not from the window edges, but from under her bed. After that night, peace was gone from the house. Elara's belongings were constantly being rearranged. Spools of thread she had carefully lined up on the table would be scattered by morning, and sometimes kitchen utensils would disappear, only to be found days later in an unfrequented hidden spot. But the worst were the whispers that came from inside the walls at night. They spoke in a foreign language she couldn't understand, but Elara knew that they weren't just talking. They were discussing her. One evening, Elara woke up with a start, terrified. The whispers from inside the wall had suddenly stopped. In their place, a slow, creaking sound of footsteps began on the wooden floor. The sound slowly approached her bedroom, then stopped right at the foot of her bed. Elara held her breath, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. When the walking sound ceased, the room's temperature dropped within seconds. She shivered as if caught in the middle of winter. Then she felt a pressure slowly pulling down the edge of her blanket. Elara had never been so afraid in her life. She closed her eyes, clasped her trembling hands, and began to pray. When the prayer was finished, the coldness and the pressure suddenly vanished. The next day, in desperation, Elara moved to the living room. There, the large old mirror hung on the wall. Its surface was fogged and dirty with years of dust and moisture. Elara stood before the mirror and looked at herself. At that exact moment, the mirror's dirty surface momentarily cleared for a single second, as if someone had wiped it from the inside. Behind her own tired face, Elara saw a long, thin, and dark silhouette leaning toward her. The silhouette was a shadow, but it was chilling as if it had weight. Elara tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Before the mirror could fog up again, The silhouette drew closer to Elara's face and whispered with a guttural hiss, "We won't leave. This place is ours now." Elara now knew these were not simple ghosts. They were malevolent entities trying to drive her out of the house. This psychological war lasting weeks had drained Elara's soul. The final and most terrifying encounter took place during a violent autumn storm that hit the village. The thunder sounded like it would tear the roof apart. Elara, holding on to the last of her strength, was praying by candlelight in the kitchen when all the doors and windows of the house suddenly, all at once, began to rattle violently. It was as if not the outside storm, but an inner rage was shaking the house. Then, heavy, bulky footsteps were heard rapidly descending from the attic. It sounded like something massive, not a normal person, but something like a log, was stomping down the stairs. The footsteps reached the living room on the first floor. They slowed down and stopped right behind the stool where Elara was sitting. Elara's eyes were fixed on the flickering flame of the candle. A freezing breath suddenly struck her face. The whisper this time was right next to her ear, much clearer and closer than before, and surprisingly high-pitched, like a child's voice. "Do you want to play with us, grandmother?" An electric shock seemed to run through Elara's frozen body. She knew she was face to face with death. She slowly reached out and grabbed the rusty, large scissors she had used for cutting fabric for years, lying on the table. She used all her strength to grip those scissors, and then, turning all her fear into a scream, she swung the scissors toward the dark void behind her. In that instant, only the weak light of the candle illuminated the room. The scissors made a dull sound as if hitting something, and then a piercing, bone-chilling scream erupted, sharp like metal hitting glass. The scream covered the kitchen, shaking Elara's bones, and then a sudden, violent gust of wind blew out the candle, plunging everything into pitch-black darkness. In the morning, the village priest found Elara in the kitchen, asleep in her chair, holding the rusty scissors. The house was silent. Only the distant sounds of birds broke the quiet. From that day on, Elara neither heard the stools move nor the walls whisper. The house had found a cold peace, like a tomb. Grandmother Elara spent the rest of her life in that house, but every night before bed, she would double-check the doors and inspect the windows, because she knew that in the dark corners of the house, the shadows that had whispered, "We won't leave," were simply waiting patiently for the next storm, the next solitary night. Our story ends here. For more stories like this, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the videos. See you in the next story. Take care of yourselves.